Hey everyone, my name is Tegan and welcome back to TandeWrites, where we are wrapping up my reading for February. So I thought January was just a fluke for me because I read 13 books, which is like a notable amount more than what I usually read. That's usually like the 6 to 10 region. And then I went ahead and read 13 books in February as well, and I don't know what's going on with me. But honestly, I will say I've read a lot of like shorter books this month, and having a Kindle or like an actual e-reader to read ebooks off rather than just my phone screen has, as I said before, changed my life. And I don't know what about it has exactly changed my life. I think something to do with the glare. I want to look at the screen longer. I'm not being distracted by constant TikTok notifications. It's changed me. And here are all the books I read this month. We have a nice equal mix of like audiobooks, advanced copies, reading books with my physical TBR. It's a fun bunch. But this also looks a lot more like my regular reading, whereas last month was very YA contemporary heavy as I was researching comparison titles for my book. So yeah, if we look at the moods, we have mysterious, dark and tense right back at the top where they should be. A little bit of emotional and adventurous in there, and then everything else is quite small. Just one book. Just one book was lighthearted and funny this month. Top genres are fantasy, romance and horror, and again I predominantly read YA as I've gone back to my regular scheduled reading. Average rating was 3.5 stars, which just seems to be my average rating every month. There's one book I haven't rated because it is a read for a competition, so I can't announce any official reviews or ratings until the results are announced. But predominantly 4-star reads. I think because I was rereading a lot of some of my old favourites on audiobook. That influenced it a lot. And I read a lot of books that I liked, I really enjoyed, but I didn't have like a standout favourite read of this month. Whereas last month Vesuvius was my favourite read by far. Nothing special this month, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about some books. Let's actually go kind of by format rather than chronological, because like this, bit of a mess. I also think my average time to read a book is 5 days, but that is because I have a lot of books that I read in 1 or 2 days, and then there's one book that took me like a full 2 weeks to read. And it was this book here behind me, which is not long enough to take 2 weeks. So I'll go for my audiobooks first because they were all rereads. That was Law by Alexandra Bracken, All About Places by Jennifer Niven, and Autobiography by Christine Lauren. I believe Christine Lauren. The font is way too small on my screen to read. And these are also all books I mentioned in, I think I did a video last month where I did a tier list of like all of my favourite reads, like all of my top reads across every year I've been reading Goodreads or like actually consciously reading. And I can't remember which category I put half these books in, but rereading them now, Law by Alexandra Bracken, for me, is still kind of like a book of all time. Again, a book I enjoy so much more as like a 17-year-old because it is comped as The Hunger Games meets Greek mythology, and there are so many books that are like that now. But Law was like one of the first for me. It's got a special place in my heart. It's fun, it's twisty. Rereading it, I still get excited by what's coming next. And All About Places and Autobiography come under the same category again of like YA, contemporary, slight romance, kind of sad, comparison titles for my baby here. And I think they're both books that I gave 5 stars when I was 17, or when I read them for the first time, which is probably not 17, it's probably more like 19 at this point. Didn't give them 5 stars this time around because I think my tastes have changed slightly, minimally since then, but they're still 5 stars in my heart. I also remembered very little about what was happening in these books, and the narrators were incredible. I was absolutely captivated by them. I loved them. And I found narrators that, you know, if I have infinite budget, they are who I would want narrating my own book. I had 3 library book reads this month, which were First and Then by Emma Mills, which was my first Emma Mills book. It was Annihilation, because I'm obsessed with the film, so I thought, you know, I'll go and read the book. And The Dangerous Art of Blending In, which I thought was going to be a comparison title, but it's not. First and Then I read because it's the only Emma Mills book available on my library app, and my friend Emma is obsessed with Emma Mills, so I thought I'm going to give this a go just to see what you love about it. And I wasn't expecting to enjoy it because it comes under the YA kind of romance category, which I was reading very heavily last month and I didn't enjoy many of them, but I loved this one. I loved the tone and the humour, and every character in it feels so very human and flawed in a way that I relate to them. And I still don't understand your decisions because we live very different lives. I was not a teenager with any romance in my life. It doesn't relate to me, but I felt these characters. And I will be like cyberbullying my library into getting more Emma Mills books so I can have a little read. I don't think she's very popular in the UK. I don't think I've seen her books out and about, but I will be looking now. The book version of Annihilation I loved because it's short. I gave it 4 stars. But it says so much in such a short amount of time, and I was captivated through every page. And it has, I was gonna say, it has like a few little horror elements, but I was sat there like tense, nervous the entire time reading it. And as I said, I did read it because I love the film, and I obviously was spending every page like, wow, they didn't put this in the film, they didn't put this in the film, they didn't put this in the film. But I did understand every single thing that wasn't put in the film. It made sense to me. But this book, very good, I loved it. And this like kind of sci-fi, almost dystopian thing, it's not something that I read at all. I'm not a sci-fi girly in the slightest. But I love this. However, I will say that as of recording, I'm reading the sequel, because this was originally a 3-book series, and I think a 4th one came out like 10 years later. I'm reading the book, what's it called? Is it called Acceptance or Authority? Or it's called Authority. Authority is 3 times the length of Annihilation, and so far it is half the amount of fun. Then my other library read was The Dangerous Art of Blending In, which I thought, okay, it's going to be this YA, queer, mental health, maybe a slight romance, it's contemporary. It's going to be the perfect comparison title for my book that I've finished writing it, the book that I'm querying right now. And it's not. And I'm only disappointed because I went into this read hoping that it would be something I can utilise for querying, and it's not. But I think I would have picked it up on my own, but probably 5 to 10 years ago. I'm not sure when it came out, probably in the past 5 to 10 years. But this is a book about a boy in like a very Greek, are they Catholic? Christian. Very religious family. He is gay and closeted. And his mother is like very abusive because she thinks she has the devil in him and things like that. I think ultimately the issue is solved because the main character boy kind of like runs away or moves in with his best friend who he's kind of in love with, and they had a few there's some kind of like blurry consent vibes going on, but it's basically saying like running away for love solves the problems. And a lot of people I think loved this book, just wasn't quite for me as someone who doesn't believe in romance and therefore does not believe romance can save the day. Then one book I read was A Midnight So Deadly by Ren Handman, but unfortunately cannot talk about a huge amount because it is a competition entry. But I'll say I liked a lot of elements of it. I did feel it was very repetitive until like over halfway through. I will be writing some kind of like functional review for it. And then 3 advanced copies this month as well. This is a very exciting month. There's a lot of 3s here. Okay, the first advanced copy I read this month was This Is Me Trying by Jenna Adams. And as I started reading it, I was like perusing the Goodreads Storygraph pages, and I noticed that this book originally came out in 2022 with a different title and a different cover, and now I guess it's being re-released under this new branding. Also, there's a lot of books called This Is Me Trying recently, and I don't know how much of it is capitalising off of the Taylor Swift song This Is Me Trying. Probably none, but... And I'm not sure why this book is kind of being re-released. I can't find anything online about it. The original publisher still has the book under the original title, and I don't know why this was on NetGalley, honestly. Like, it's coming out sometime this year, so like, why are we re-releasing a book 3 years later with no explanation I can find? And I'll say I gave this book 2 stars. I was very interested in it, obviously because I requested it, and like because it has like these strong mental health and consent themes, and I think there's a deep importance for YA books in particular to discuss these difficult topics with honesty and sensitivity, and this one does do that, and it talks about consent and codependency. But the book just doesn't work for me because the writing style is very heavy on telling, leaves very little open for me as the reader to interpret, and the side characters don't feel like they have a life of their own outside of their relationship with the 2 main narrators, who I think are Brooke and Matt. The side characters don't seem to exist unless they're like on the page in the moment, except a few times we had a time jump and it was like 5 years later and suddenly they had kids and I don't know what's going on, who are these people? And I think the writing also focuses on the wrong things in terms of like actual scene, plot and structure, things like that. Like there is a self-harm scene described in like a lot of detail and it lasts multiple pages, but there's also a kind of plot line where the main character has allegedly spent months planning to leave the country, except that doesn't appear on page at all. It just mentions in a sentence that she's been planning this for months. And it's like, why did we not see that? We've been with her through all these months. Why have we not seen her planning to just leave the country? So it seems like she just like ran away for no reason. And later on in the book it's like, yeah, she did actually pretty much run away for no reason. But the one thing I did enjoy a lot about this book on the inside, because I really enjoy the cover as well, is that the main character Brooke does go to therapy in the end to deal with like all her problems. She attends these sessions on page and she speaks positively about the experience. So we love positive therapy representation. And the next advanced copy I read was Vampires at Sea. Again, I gave this 2 stars. It's not my usual read because basically the plot in the description is described as a vampire couple go on a queer cruise and basically just want to join an orgy. And I was like, that's the entire plot. So yeah, not my usual read, but it seemed fun. So I was lured in. I was like, Vampires at Sea? Sure, why not? This book took me a while to get into. I think it was like the 50 to 60% mark where I started to feel invested in what was going on rather than just being an observer of what was happening. There were a few moments I enjoyed, but the pacing and tone, again, were very telling. And that just doesn't work for me and what I enjoy in books. I think I'm just not the right audience for this because I'm sure that there is an audience who enjoys very telling books, probably people who are newer to the genre. And I think this book is supposed to be funny in a lot of points. I can see that they're trying to make jokes, but they're not landing. And I wasn't getting the humour out of it, which again could just be a me thing. The events felt far too repetitive for the length. Like, very short book, and it is just the same thing happening over and over again, just with different characters. And also the fact that the main characters are vampires just seemed very insignificant to the plot. A lot of people are promoting this as a horror. I didn't really get any horror from it. And then the world building is non-existent, and so is my understanding of the paranormal creatures. But to be fair, the only paranormal creatures in this are the vampire couple, who I didn't feel like being vampires. I'm guessing the woman will use her like power of compulsion a lot, but I'm not actually sure. And then there's a shapeshifter who is non-binary and the nemesis of the story, and I'm a big fan of them. And I too would not be overly fussed if my boring husband didn't come back one night. And then my final arc of the month is The River Has Roots, which I think is like very highly anticipated. It must come out this week that I'm releasing this video, because it's by one of the authors of This Is How We Lose the Time War, and obviously everyone's obsessed with that. And I originally pre-ordered this book because I thought, yeah, I'm going to be obsessed with that. It's like a short little novella. And I also have cancelled my pre-order. This book I gave 3 stars. I know, very brave. But overall wasn't quite for me. The writing in it is very dreamy and ethereal, and this is what I loved about the book, that I was immersed in every page despite my grip on the plot being like a thread at best. There's some very beautiful descriptions of people and places, and I'm usually someone who can enjoy a book that prioritizes vibes over plot. However, this is something that's been mentioned in other reviewers' reviews, that the story is kind of too ambitious for the length. There is a lot happening in very few pages, so it means a lot of things feel underdeveloped in comparison to some others. For example, the magic system, despite being explained or mentioned multiple times in like paragraphs of detail, the magic system is grammar. But no matter how many times it's been explained to me, I don't know what it does or what it means. Which I think some of the reviewers have mentioned, so it's not just me being a silly goose. The pacing like drags at the start and then rushes from like the climax to the conclusion within a handful of pages. So when they expose a villain in the story for what he's done and how they deal with him, that happens in like a paragraph. A little bit underwhelming. But overall, this is a very heartfelt story about sisters, and it captured a lot of emotion in a very small amount of time. And I would love to read a full-length novel about some other characters in this world. Okay, so that should leave us with the 3 books I read of my physical TBR this month. So obviously I have a lot of books around me, more than I would like to admit are unread. So at the start of the year I made a list of specific books, originally starting with like 1 per month, and then I can read like anything that comes in the post and I get gifted throughout the year. But I made a list of like 12 predetermined books that I will be reading this year. And this month I read 3 of them, which is a lot better than last month where I think I just read the 1. First up, and also like one of the first books I read this month, was Our Dark Duet, which is the second book in very slightly cut off my V. Schwab shelf. It's the second book in the Monsters of Verity series, well, duology. And I really did love it. Not as much as the original, because that one I think had a more interesting relationship between Kate and August is like my baby. and also August's sister, whose name has slipped my mind today. But I still really love the second book, and the ending was like complete emotional devastation. Will not forgive V. Schwab for that. Will keep buying her books though. I gave it 4 stars, and it probably is the best new book I've read this month, but it still didn't like capture me. And I tend not to have my favourite books of the month be like parts of series. That's just a rule I've invented for myself, but this probably is my favourite read of the month. Next up we have this lovely one behind me, which is I feed her to the beast, and the beast is me. And this is the book that despite its length took me a while to read. The font size in this is also tiny, I've just realised. Like, okay, so this book in my heart is a lot longer than, is it just like 300 pages? 330 pages. This is about ballet and selling your soul to the devil to be successful in ballet, because she is the one black dancer amongst all these white dancers, and they all look down on her because she's not worthy of being part of the ballet, but she is. She's so talented. But despite how she can outdance everyone here, she still has to sell her soul to the devil to be great. And I did really enjoy a lot of elements of this, but I think there's a lot of moments where I was confused to what was going on. I didn't really understand some characters' motivations, but I liked it. I liked it. Maybe not enough to read the sequel, because I think it's a sequel. And I don't think I was huge on the final chapter, but I liked it. And the final book I read this month was The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher, because somewhere up here, I have this very beautiful, stunning Illumicrate Evernight edition. And this is like the one, I think, T. Kingfisher horror book that I haven't read yet. I have a lot of her middle grade and a few like of the other fantasy ones left. But beautiful. I thought it was going to be short, it's not. It's in the 300s. It's in the high 300s pages. But I did smash this out in 2 days, unlike the last one, which took me 2 weeks. And I'll say it's probably might be my least favourite out of the T. Kingfisher horror ones. I say as we have 3 here. So The Holy Places is like my favourite, and probably joint favourite with Nettle and Bone of her works overall. House with Good Bones, solid second. This one, because I think House of Good Bones is also like very short, and it does a lot in a short amount of time, and it does it effectively. Whereas this one, I think, could be shorter. It is like full big novel length. A few repetitive moments. A lot of pages where the main character like finds a manuscript. And I can't elaborate hugely on that, but there are like pages and pages of this manuscript, and I was like skim reading those. Because like, yeah, relevant to the plot, but I could have had it summarised, you know. What I love most about this book is that the main character she's gone to like her dead nan's house, who's a massive hoarder, to clear out this house, and there's creepy things in the woods, and she's very ready to like pack up her stuff and go and leave, but she's brought her dog with her, and her dog disappears one night, and she ultimately decides she is not leaving this house no matter how many like demonic wood creatures try and break in, until she gets her dog back. And that's what I love about this book. Dog lives, dog saves the day, love letter to dog. Okay, so that is all 13 books I read in February, which brings me to 26 books total for the year. My reading goal is 75. I usually start with 52 books, because with my lifestyle, 1 book a week is very attainable. But I know what I'm like, I know I'll read more than that, so I set it to 75, but now I'm a third of the way through my goal, and we're not a third of the way through the year, so am I going to increase to 100? Because I did read 100 last year. Who's to say? No one actually cares. That's why I read in February. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!